quite a few people expected this evening, so thank you very much for joining this Zoom call. I think I will make a start. We've still got people coming in, but we've got about sort of 45 minutes tonight, and we've got some amazing speakers, and I know you want to hear from them rather than myself. Just in terms of the housekeeping, welcome to the Co-op Party Zoom call. Hopefully you're in the right Zoom. This call is being recorded, so if you don't want your video, your face to be on the recording, then please do turn your camera off. But we will be recording our speakers this evening. We are muting everybody. We've got a lot of people in this call tonight, but what you can do is use the group chat. So at the bottom you'll find a little button with the chat button, the group chat. Stick your questions and comments in there, and we will be having some time for sort of Q&A afterwards with regards to that. So please stick them in there. Which leads me on to our fabulous speakers this evening. We're going to cover the issue of shop worker violence. It's a really, really important issue that the Co-op Party has been campaigning on for quite a while, even before the current situation. But actually, you know, our retail workers are absolutely key workers. They are doing a fantastic job on the front line, and that's why thousands of Co-op Party members and our representatives sent that thank you to retail workers over the last few weeks for the job that they are doing. But unfortunately, we're also seeing a shocking level of violence against shop workers. And with the speakers tonight, we've got the General Secretary of USDAW, Paddy Lillis. USDAW is an affiliate of the Co-op Party. Paddy, a great friend, having attended previous events with us and working with us on this really important issue. We're also going to hear from Saunders as well, and Claire is going to give us that view from the front line. And you may recognise Claire. She's been on our screen a few times. I've certainly seen her on the BBC News, but she's a store manager at the Co-op Group, and she's going to share her experiences on the front line, but also working with the group and USDAW as well on this issue. And then we're going to hear from some of our representatives, so Alex Norris, MP for Nottingham North, but also Shadow Minister for Health and Social Care, and congratulations on that role, Alex. And also Daniel Johnson, MSP for Edinburgh Southern, and he's also a member of the cross-party group on independent convenience stores. So we'll hear from both Westminster and Holyrood as well, what they are doing in terms of tackling this issue. But without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Paddy Lillis, General Secretary of USDAW. Really great that you can join us tonight, and hand over to you really to talk about this issue and introduce it.
Okay, a huge thank you, Emma, to you and the Co-op Party for putting this together. It's such an important issue. But can I firstly put on record my huge thanks and our executives' thanks to all those workers who are working every day. We're now talking about bringing people back to work, but we tend to forget there's been many hundreds of thousands out there working during this national emergency, putting their lives at risk, not only in terms of the health service, but our retail workers, making sure that the shelves are filled and people are supplied. So my enormous thanks to every one of our reps and members for the work we do. But can I just put in context in terms of the union? We represent 400,000 in the retail and distribution sector, and you know, campaigning and especially around violence and abuse to retail workers isn't new to us. For the last 15 years, we have been running our Freedom from Fear campaign, which year on year sadly has seen increases in violence, abuse to retail workers. Workers just wanting to go and do their job. I call them the beating heart of the communities, out there helping serve the community every day. And a small minority, albeit a significant minority, think it's okay to threaten, abuse, and sadly assault them in the course of their duty. So, as I said, for 15 years we've been doing this. We've been also running surveys every year, and in the last couple of years, not only has USDAW been running a survey about violence in the retail sector, but so has the British Retail Consortium and the Association of Convenience Stores. So 3 separate independent organisations, and sadly, year on year over the last 3 or 4 years, we have seen steady increases to threats, abuse and violence towards retail staff. And to give you an indication, last year, 62% of retail workers experienced verbal abuse, almost a third were threatened, and 4% were assaulted. Now, that's on a year-on-year basis. We now have, and this is a regular occurrence in the retail sector. And it's seen, sadly, it's seen in some quarters as just part of the job. Well, let me make it clear. It's never part of the job. Violence of any description, abuse of any description, is never part of the job for any worker. They go to work to do their job, and that's really, really important. We take ourselves now forward to this coronavirus in the last 6-7 weeks. And what we've seen, again, is an actual doubling of violence and abuse towards those who are at the sharp end, those out there putting their lives and they're risking their lives and their families every day to ensure there's food on the shelves and that our families in the communities are fed. I think it's deplorable and absolutely disgusting. But to give you again a figure for that, we carried a survey out in 9 days in early April, from the 3rd to the 12th of April. Over 5,000 retail workers, over 5,000 responded to that survey, and out of the 5,000, 41% had accepted to be threatened. 2/3 of them had been verbally abused, and sadly, 196 of the 5,000 had been physically assaulted whilst carrying out their duties, i.e. going to work to help feed the communities in which we all live in. Deplorable beyond belief. This small, albeit significant minority of individuals who think it's okay to do that, and it has to be called out. So that's where I start from in terms of as General Secretary and leading the campaign to ensure that we have stricter rules. We need to see better enforcement. We need to see more police on the beat. But I want to pay particular tribute to the Co-op group and the work that they have done in terms of their CCTV system, their mics for all their staff to ensure that they're in constant contact, taking away some of the fear they have. But again, as I said, depressing as it is, a doubling during this coronavirus of assaults, violence and threats towards retail workers. And for us, it has to stop. Now, I've said these are individuals who are at the beating heart of the community. They're somebody's mother, father, son or daughter. They're there trying to do their best in what is exceptionally difficult circumstances. I mean, we're facing an enormous challenge as a country, and people, as I said, putting themselves at risk, and then we have a small minority abuse them. So we want to see tougher penalties against those who think it's okay to assault and abuse retail workers. We want to see a specific offence, and I know that Alex and Daniel will speak in a bit more detail on what they're doing in Parliament and the Scottish Parliament shortly. But I want to also put on record my thanks to them for the work that they're doing to ensure that retail workers know that we are on their side and we will do what's needed to protect them going forward. I also want to pay tribute to all those employers who work alongside the unions to ensure that they're safe, everyone is safe. But again, going forward, I also want to pay particular credit to David Hanson. David Hanson was a Member of Parliament for Dillon in North Wales.
And David joins us on the call as well. David is actually in the room with us.
David, I'm delighted you're on the call, and again, our enormous thanks for the work that you've done in Parliament in bringing this to the fore and ensuring that government hears loud and clear that this is unacceptable and needs to be done. And just before I wind up, I want to say in December 2018, I met along with David. David set the meeting up, David Hanson, with the Home Office, along with the retail, the British Retail Consortium, the Association of Convenience Stores, the Police Federation, the Co-op Group, and the Co-op Party. And we all met with the Home Office and made the plea for this to be seen as an aggravated offence and have specific legislation. It's fair to say the Home Office weren't keen, but David made it clear, if you don't deal with this, then I'll take it back to the House for a vote. And the outcome of that was to ask the government to go out for a call for evidence, which finished in June last year. So a call for evidence for 6 months, which finished in June last year. We're now May the following year, and that call for evidence hasn't still come out. We haven't seen the outcome of it. And again, it's going to be a year from that finished, and we haven't seen it. So I'm saying now, get this out. Let us see what the evidence is, and hopefully we can get legislation in place to protect our workers. They're key workers, and I'm delighted now. It's taken a pandemic, it's taken an emergency, I guess, to identify retail workers as key workers. That's one of the problems over the years. They weren't seen as that important. They were just shop workers who just went to work. And when I know they're much more than that. They're people who, as I said, the beating heart of the community, serving the community, doing a job, putting their life at risk, putting their families' lives at risk to ensure the country gets fed and water. So I'm going to leave it at that. But I want to thank everyone for their support on this. And I look forward to both MPs' contributions and telling us what our next steps are as we go forward. I'll hand back to you.
Thank you very much, Paddy. Thank you very much for that. And absolutely shocking to hear that the number of instances have actually doubled since this situation started. And just before we move to kind of the what next and the parliamentarians, I'd like to bring in Claire Saunders, who is a key worker, and that thank you is to you and your colleagues as well. Just to share with you, really, share with us about your experiences on the front line as you're a store manager for the Co-op Group.
Yeah, I am. So I work in Romford in Essex, obviously, as you know, for the Co-op. Since the COVID pandemic broke, we've seen a huge increase in verbal abuse to ourselves. As we know, obviously, and you know, I'm campaigning heavily with this, we always got it before, but since the initial panic buying began, that's where I feel it was at its worst, because people did not care what they did or what they were saying, as long as they could get what they wanted. I had verbal abuse a good few times a day, especially the people on the tills, because obviously they had the limit buying, so people didn't want to be told they could only buy one toilet roll, they wanted to buy more. So the people initially on the tills were seeing it a lot more. I had an experience in store where I was pushed over and an elderly gentleman pushed over just for a customer wanting to get past to get what they wanted. So it was horrific, to be honest. And obviously we are still getting a lot more abuse, because what we're seeing is that shoplifting is on the increase again, especially last week. So we're hearing people saying, oh, there isn't any shoplifting. People haven't got any money now. Obviously we're seeing, especially in some areas, that the shoplifters are coming back out again. At the initial, when it first happened, I was told by a shoplifter, don't come any closer to me, I'm not giving you anything back, or I'll spit on you and give you coronavirus. That isn't part of my job. I don't go to work to get that. It's on top of the anxieties we're feeling anyway, putting ourselves at risk, risking obviously taking things home to our families. You don't go to work to experience that. I've had delivery drivers telling me that they've had people jumping on the tailgates trying to pull the cages off to get what they want. They're getting abused as well. So it's not just us on the front line, obviously the delivery drivers as well. When they're pulling into car parks, they were surrounded by people. We had to shut the store when we had deliveries because people were pushing us out of the way to get to the cages to get what they wanted. So no care for us and no care for other customers. When obviously social distancing, some customers don't feel that they need to social distance when they want to come in to buy a packet of cigarettes. They think they can just jump the queue because they don't want to go around the whole store. Well, no, that is not, to me, for me, that's not an essential item as milk, bread, things like that. You stand in a queue like everyone else. So yeah, the verbal abuse we have faced, and obviously stories from other colleagues, physical abuse, it's really not part of the job. Obviously anxieties are really high, and obviously that is causing more tensions, and I believe that's obviously why as well some customers are acting in that way towards us.
And can I ask you, what do you feel would help you as key workers? What support or help are you looking for?
We need to have sentences, as Paddy said. They've got to realise there's a consequence to their actions, because this isn't just going to go away. It's not something that's just going to disappear. Social distancing, obviously, as we're hearing, is going to continue for a long time. So we're going to change we are changing the whole way we shop. So, and it isn't going to be, tomorrow we're all just going to be allowed to walk in a shop. People don't like it. It's fine if it was a nice sunny day and they're out in the sun, but when it's raining and they're cold, they're not liking that. But that's not our fault. Obviously, we need to keep ourselves safe, and they need to be safe. And all the staff don't deserve to have people abuse them through something that is set out for their safety. So tougher sentencing, we do need that. It's got to be done. They've got to understand that there is going to be a consequence for their actions.
Thank you very much, Claire, for that. And I think that moves us nicely on to Alex, who is an MP in Westminster and has, of course, had attempted to bring in legislation around violence against shop workers. Can you bring us up to date in what, I guess, how you're taking the concerns of key workers like Claire and trying to change the law around this?
Yeah, thanks, Emma, and thanks very much for having me. I feel as a Labour and Co-op Member of Parliament, this is a really critical campaign. It's something that, as a co-op movement, we feel very strongly about. It's something as trades unionists and us two have done incredible work over a long period of time in this area. So I feel a real privilege in being the one who's able to use my place in Parliament to try and bring it forwards and to try and change the law. So I thought I'd just very briefly update people on where we're up to. So I've done two now in the two parliamentary sessions that I've been a Member of Parliament. I've done two 10-minute rule bills. So they're very much bottom of the order paper, but the best place, certainly in opposition and as I was at the beginning as a backbencher, to get your issues on the agenda. So you bring forward a draft bill in both cases around violence against shop workers. You try and build some support across Parliament, and then it gives you a chance to give it an airing in the chamber. Both times it's been very successful. I mean, I think the thing that it's really brought home to me is even the act of putting that bill on the order paper and bringing it into Parliament. I got so many stories from shop workers, retail workers who'd been affected by violence at work, but then also such a broad cross-party consensus on this. As I said when I introduced it just before the lockdown, you collect a range of signatories. You need to get a dozen names for you to be able to bring it forward. And my name spanned from Philip Davis to Graham Morris across parliamentary views. That's about a broader range as you could possibly get. But I had someone from every single political party ask me to co-sign. I have absolutely no doubt that what we're talking about, there is a majority for in Parliament. Our only challenge is to find the right way to bring that to bear. So the 10-minute rule process, those bills don't succeed. We've got to be really honest about that. But we do have a chance to keep pushing it forward for a couple more stages yet. And I'll just end with some ideas and some asks for your ideas. But also it's important the better route was probably the route that David Hanson was taking. I'm glad David's with us, around amendments to other legislation. And we got very close on the offensive weapons bill. And out of that, David got this really important concession around the call for evidence. And the call for evidence is absolutely critical in terms of proving our case about what we already know is happening, and what Claire's talking about is happening up and down the country every day, unacceptable levels. I believe Parliament has a special responsibility to do something about that. Because if you think about it, every so often, and this is the case for dozens and dozens of different items, we will say to shop workers, we want you to restrict the sale of something. So that could be alcohol to minors, alcohol to people who are already drunk. Recently, it was acids and knives. Or you could name dozens and dozens of examples of things that shop workers, we ask them in that moment to stop the sale of to someone who shouldn't have them for whatever reason. And in that moment, that is a critical public service. You know, they are of course representatives of their employer and working in that role, but they are doing a public service for all of us that people in Parliament like me have asked them to do. And at that moment, we know that that's a real moment of risk. I remember from my time working in a shop, I remember having to decline sales to people I went to school with because I either knew they weren't old enough or I knew they were old enough but they didn't have their ID with them. And that moment was difficult then with peers. But with someone who might already be angry or somebody who might already be drunk, that is a flashpoint moment. And we ought to be strengthening the law. And this is what I asked for in my bill, to strengthen the sentencing powers in that moment and to make it an aggravated offence. It's a very modest change, but one that would have a significant impact at sentencing, but also critically a significant deterrent effect. And that's what we've been pushing hard for and what I think the call for evidence will prove. So since then, I've spoken to the Minister for Policing, Kit Malthouse. Obviously, the first question I asked was, where's the call for evidence and can we see it, please? And he said, and you know, actually, I did take this at face value, though you can form your own conclusions. He essentially said that he had it with him. He said, but we're not allowed to talk about anything but coronavirus at the moment. As soon as our communication channels are clear so we can start talking about other things, I promise you I will release it as soon as possible. So it is ready, it is there to be released, but as Paddy says, it's massively overdue. And I believe, I have no doubt that it will tell us exactly what we know is happening anecdotally, and it will make a very profound argument and call for change. Now, the minister also said to me that he, you know, because I said, well, I think this needs legislation. The minister said, well, I'm not sure about that. Ministers always say that. He said, I think you need to talk to the Sentencing Council, Alex. I think that the sentencing around this has been too lax. I don't think prosecutors are pushing hard enough. And I think within the law already, you could do all the things you're talking about. Now, that isn't quite true because we want that special aggravating factor, and that I believe needs primary legislation. But we will be pushing that with the Sentencing Council and meeting them to make that point, but then coming back to parliamentary means. So the next stage is twofold. We keep getting the date for the second reading of my bill keeps being pushed further and further back because those bills happen on Fridays. And at the moment, we're not having Friday sittings for private members' business. However, we will get an airing. So we're writing a full bill, and we will have a bill somewhere that the government could just take and could give it government time and could get it through very quickly with, I say, very, very broad support. And that will help shape our arguments. So again, your ideas for that beyond what we've already spoken about in the introductions, please do let us know or write to me. And then critically, I think pursuing David's route, which is to find amendments to a bill, because I believe very strongly that if we put this to a vote in Parliament, we would have a majority because of the broad range of support we have. So it feels slow, and it is much slower than it's needed to be, but we're going to keep pushing. We need your support, whether it's to push your members of Parliament, as I know with the incredible letter signing campaign lots and lots of people did, whether it's to push through motions through your councils or whatever. Please do keep doing what you're doing because we will get there. Thanks, Emma.
For that, and I think some ideas there. We've got a few more contributions, but we are going to open this up to people's sort of reflections, experiences. But obviously you heard from Alex there a direct call about how we can support him to get that legislation, to get those changes, and how we can campaign as a movement. I want to move north of the border, and last but not least to Daniel Johnson, who's an MSP, and there's been work not just in Westminster, but you've been leading the charge up in Scotland as well. So do you want to share what you're trying to do up there?
Of course. And let me begin by thanking you for giving me this opportunity to talk about my bill and what I've been doing. But before I do, I realised as I was preparing for this, it was something of a relief to be talking to the Co-op Party about my bill and about violence against retail workers, because normally when I'm talking about my bill, I feel I have to lay it on pretty thick to really hammer home how big a problem this is, what a serious impact it has on retail workers, and why this needs legislation and much better, clearer, focused action from government to tackle it. And it's a relief because the Co-op Party has been such a strong supporter. And could I just say thank you in particular to Richard McCready, who I know is on this Zoom call. But I think this is the frustration. I brought forward my bill because I come from a retail background. Prior to being an MSP, I worked in retail, and I just knew how stressful it is, the traumatizing effect that violence and abuse against shop workers has. And the curious thing I find that when I talk about my bill, talk about what I want to do, and talk with other stakeholders, other people engaged with public policy, more often than not, people recognize exactly what I'm talking about, recognize that the phenomenon that we have at the moment, where people feel that it is okay to have a go at someone working behind a counter, wearing a name badge, that for some reason, because they're the customer and that person's at work, that they can have a go. And yet, despite the fact, I think there is this recognition that people understand that or recognize in their personal lives, this is not an issue that has had the airing in terms of public policy and public debate, but I think that it really needs to. And I hope that one thing, one positive thing that could come out of the coronavirus situation that we're all in right now is that people actually do start to recognize both the critical work that retail workers do, but actually also the stress and pressure that they are put under, not just during the crisis right now, but more generally through their day-to-day work, day in, day out, week in, week out. So I think there is an opportunity here. And I think it says something of the seriousness of this issue, of just the broad support. USDAW have been supportive clearly from the outset of this, the Co-operative Party, but also the GMB, the Scottish Retail Consortium, which is the Scottish part of the British Retail Consortium, Scottish Grocers Federation, NFRN. So that's broad range of both trade union and industry support, which I think says something about the situation that retail finds itself in terms of violence against retail workers. So I've introduced a bill, and we have a slightly more straightforward approach in the Scottish Parliament, rather than kind of arcane lotteries and ballots and 10-minute rule bills and stuff like that. We have essentially a bus queue. It's a first come, first served basis, so that private members in the Scottish Parliament, if they have a proposition, can bring forward that proposition, and they get support from the Parliament in terms of drafting and consultation processes. And this is a process that I started right at the beginning of this Parliament. So I've been through that consultation process, and my bill is currently being examined by committee, and will start the three-stage parliamentary process in the Scottish Parliament. So we are on the cusp of getting this through the Scottish Parliament. What my bill does is it creates a specific statutory offence of assaulting or abusing a retail worker. It also makes it, as part of that specific offence, an offence to obstruct or hinder a retail worker carrying out their duties, which is a concept lifted straight from the Emergency Workers Act that we introduced, which the Scottish Labour Party took forward in the Scottish Parliament when it was in power. And it also creates the statutory aggravation that Alex outlined. So those are the three components of my bill. And I think what is interesting is very much like Alex's experience, right the way through this process, I've had the same sorts of arguments being made. Oh, we don't really need this. We have common law assault already. There's nothing in law which would stop people being prosecuted. But there is definitely a change. We had evidence last week at committee from the Minister, who was certainly, I think, making noises that they may be supportive, especially around the statutory aggravation. And I think that is a direct result of the current context, a direct result of the understanding of the wide range of public goods that retail workers are now being expected to do. So not only are we asking them to uphold the law, to enforce age restrictions, there's actually a core public health policy that retail workers are being asked to implement. And I think that's the reason why I think we are the on the verge of having a shift, hopefully, in position within the Scottish Parliament. And I think that the chances of getting this legislation through are improving. But I think, and just briefly, I think we really do need to focus on this issue. I don't think we can let this moment pass. And I think, just to reiterate, it is clear that over recent years, we have increasingly had a tendency from governments of all stripes and all hues of this assumption that you can do public policy on the cheap through retail workers, that simply adding a button on the till is all you need to do to change public policy. And whether that's age restrictions through to the plastic bag charge. But each time you do that, you're forcing retail workers to say no to the general public. And when they do, that brings them into conflict with them. Secondly, when we do ask them to uphold age restrictions, we are asking those people to uphold the law. And I think it is a basic and fundamental principle that when people are being asked to uphold the law, they should have the protection of the law. That's why it's a specific offence to assault a police officer. It's why it's a specific offence to assault a border officer. It's why it's a specific offence to assault a tax inspector. If you uphold the law, you should have the protection of the law. But I think beyond that, I think there is a broader sense of, I think hopefully this will open up an argument about the nature of public-facing work as a whole. Because again, a criticism that gets levelled at me, well, why are you singling out retail workers? Well, and there's a simple answer to that. I am just one MSP. This is a private member's bill. There's a limit to what I can bring forward. But I think there is a legitimate point here that every worker who works with the public, who has a public-facing role, is exposed to a risk. But further than that, that when those crimes are committed, when a retail worker or another public-facing worker is assaulted, because they are in their place of work, the nature of that crime is different. Because they're at work, they're having to return to the place where that assault occurred. And that is a traumatizing phenomenon. That is a traumatizing thing to have to go through, to have to go back to the place where you endured and suffered that crime, where you became a victim. I think that stands to reason that there is an issue there and something that we need recognition in law. And I think that's where, whatever happens with Alex's bill, whatever happens with my bill, we have to keep the focus. We have to ensure that there is a public debate so that we can actually make progress on this vital issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Daniel. And thank you for bringing us up to speed with what's happening in terms of your bill. We've got about 10 minutes left for questions and sort of contributions. We have an amazing panel. We've obviously heard from Paddy in terms of the work of USDAW, Claire on the front line, and your story about toilet rolls is going to stick with me. I think that panic buying in the beginning, we forget about the impact on people, the workers, and then from Alex and Daniel about what they're doing with regards to protecting retail workers, particularly as key workers. And I think it's a really important point, if we can't do this now, when you're facing increasing levels of violence, when can we do it? And there's a real call to action there. So if you want to comment or come in, you can either raise your hand, and I can see we've got some great people on the call, or you can use the group chat and you can stick your questions in there. I do just want to bring in though, David Hanson is on the call and is mentioned a few times by our speakers. Can you hear us, David? Do you want to?
Can.
Yes. Do you
Can you
want to
hear me?
share your thoughts?
Yeah, thanks everybody, and thanks for the chance to contribute to the discussion. I just want to suggest maybe one way forward, which is linked to what all people have said, which is what Daniel, Alex and Paddy have said, which is the consultation. The consultation was not something that dreamt up, it was something agreed by ministers in the government in December of 2018, which then had a consultation through to June of 2019. And there's a duty, I think, on ministers to report back urgently on that consultation, because the promises they gave were not just to me. I was a member of Parliament then, sadly I lost in December, not just to me, but there were promises given to the Co-op Party, to the Co-op Group, to the Federation of Retail Newsagents, to the Association of Convenience Stores, to the British Retail Consortium, to the Association of Police Officers, to Police and Crime Commissioners, all of whom and USDAW, all of whom were present in the room. So I think the key pressure point to get some change on this is to actually try and get the government to publish the report, and the Co-op Party can play a key role in that by potentially coordinating now a letter to say, with all the other parties, what's happened to that consultation? Why hasn't it been published? Because the aim all along was to get the consultation published, that if the government did something with it, that's good. If the government didn't do something, we thought the evidence would have suggested that there was the problems that colleagues have mentioned today. There's a real opportunity to do that. And I'll just leave with one other final thought, is that every constituency in the country, not just those held by Co-op and Labour MPs, every constituency in the country will have a Co-op or a similar store. It will have a Tesco's, an Asda, a Sainsbury's. It will have convenience stores. It will have petrol stations. It will have newsagents. Every member of Parliament has the potential to be under real constituency pressure to do something. And coupled with COVID-19 and the problems that our colleague from Romford said earlier, there's a real opportunity now to press for that consultation to come out, to press for some action as a result of that consultation, and to get a broad-based campaign of individuals and organisations led by the Labour and cooperative parties and movements to make that difference and get that policy change through. Because we will ultimately need government, I think, to make a difference.
Thank you very much, David, and thank you for helping us with that call to action. Just to clarify, just in terms of you want to come in, you can raise your hand there's a little button, particularly on a phone, there's a little button that allows you to raise your hand, and I can bring people in. I've got Francis. You wanted to ask a question or share some thoughts?
Oh, hi. My name's Francis Mason, a Harlow and Labour cooperative councillor.
Hi, Francis.
I just wanted to say, as someone who's, as a previous senior probation officer working in the courts, the prisons, etc., when I first started listening to this, I was thinking, well, when we were doing reports, we would be taking that aggravating factor in. But I've got to say that having listened to you all, I was particularly, the thing that swung it for me was Daniel Johnson, who talked about public policy on the cheap. And actually, until that point, I wasn't, I wasn't convinced that if I was sitting in a Crown Court now, looking at someone as sort of a worker, I would have said, actually, within sentencing guidelines, we can still about cover it. So I think well done for moving this along, because sadly we had to have coronavirus that kind of brought this to the fore. And maybe, even as a union worker, I'm, I've thought I've understood the violence against shop workers, but maybe I didn't as well. So I think both to Alex Norris and Daniel Johnson, keep up good work, and yeah, well done. Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Francis. I'll come back to our speakers at the end, let them leave us with a few thoughts. But we have Stella Creasy, MP, on. If you want to come in, Stella. Oh, if I unmute you, my apologies.
Hello, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can now.
Oh, brilliant.
Hi, Stella.
Sorry, I wasn't sure then because I'm on my phone rather than my computer. So the technology might have reached the 21st century, but I'm not sure all of us as MPs have. I want to first of all say this kind of conversation makes me incredibly proud to be a member of both the Co-op Party and USDAW, because it's so clear what a difference we can make if we can win this argument. And I mean, Alex, whatever you need in terms of help, I'm there in Parliament to sign whatever you need and stand with you whatever you need. And also, Daniel, I'm just so proud of what you're doing in the Scottish Parliament. It strikes me that one opportunity we do have, and I don't know whether, David, you might have some thoughts on this because we miss you, I would say, every single day in Parliament, is with the mayoral elections, obviously, that have been delayed now for a year, but and the Police and Crime Commissioner elections, and whether we can get some pledges out of our future mayoral candidates to support the campaign as well, and to start putting into practice, even if we haven't yet got the amendments through Parliament. And I agree with you, Alex. I think we can do, and I think there are some opportunities coming up where we can push them. But actually getting people to start showing what it would look like and highlighting in our local communities what a difference it would make, especially because of the work that so many retail workers have done over the last 5 or 6 weeks to really keep our communities moving. We owe it to them to show them that we are not going to let them be abused in this way. And I just wondered whether there were some opportunities around the mayoral elections and the police and crime commissioners to get some pledges to enact this.
Good question. And I think it was a bit specifically to David, so I'll let you come back in, David. But I know with our police and crime commissioners in particular, they were meant to be having the elections this year. We have a large number of cooperative police and crime commissioner candidates who will be standing for us next year. And I know I did a really good session with them down in London around the issue of shop worker violence. But I think you're right, a huge opportunity there to work as a movement with our other elected representatives. David, do you want to touch on that briefly?
Well, just to say, I think it's a very good idea because, again, the police minister, and I finished actually just 10 years ago today being the police minister in government. If we had people outside from local government pressing the police minister consistently on this issue, that would be of help. And I think, you know, the police and crime commissioners now, never mind in the election, the police and crime commissioners now could be asked to join a co-op party, co-op group sponsored letter to say the things that we've talked about today. We want a response to the consultation and we want to see what's coming out of that consultation. And that can be and should be done now by police and crime commissioners.
Thank you very much. And thank you very much for that question, Stella, and thank you very much for joining our call this evening. I'm going to go back through our panel really just to give us some final thoughts based on maybe what some of the other speakers have said. So I'll go in reverse order. With Daniel, anything you want to touch upon or leave us with this evening?
Well, I mean, I think that point from Stella is a really good one, because I think there's two elements to this. I think there's absolutely the legislative side of things to ensure that when these crimes are committed that they're taken seriously through the courts. But there's a really critical policing policy point here as well. And that's where the Police and Crime Commissioner and mayoral elections, despite the fact they've got nothing to do with me being up here in Scotland, don't touch us up here, but it is a really critical point. And all too often, I think retail crime is treated as a secondary order offence and doesn't receive the same prioritisation. And I have had conversations with police where they've said, well, we don't respond to that because the value of the goods stolen isn't sufficiently high enough. That is nonsense. If police turned around to households and said, well, we're not coming to investigate your house burglary because the value of the stuff that was stolen wasn't high enough, we'd have uproar. We cannot place a value on crime like this. That's unacceptable. So there is definitely a policing policy aspect to this, and why I think it is a really crucial issue for those elections.
Thank you. Alex, do you want to come in? And in particular, there were some comments about Francis as well earlier.
Yeah, it's helpful. I mean, it's one of the best things about being part of the movement that we're part of, that people have such varied backgrounds and interests and knowledge that it enhances the discussion. I appreciate that, and the discussion has moved her on with her experience in probation is a really good sign. I think that we can win the argument more generally, and also what David was saying in terms of going back and pressing as a movement. I think now is exactly the time. I completely agreed with that. I mean, fundamentally, we're in a in unprecedented times at the moment, but there will be a future after this, and we have to grasp hold of justice issues more than ever. Those who were written off as unskilled workers and really cheapened in that way a few months ago are now key workers. We cannot let that go back to business as usual. And this is one of those really big areas where we can press hard to show our shop workers that have been key workers and kept us fed in these challenging times, that we really understand what they do and we value it. And I think we'll win that case. I don't think we've got any challenge on public hearts and minds. I think we can win it in Parliament as well. We just need to have a really big push collectively on it.
Thank you very much. Claire, anything you want to add?
Yes. Yeah, I just want to say thanks to the Co-operative Party and also to USDAW for all the support, because I'm just one of millions that goes to work to do my job every day, and hopefully now with this support, and I will continue to work with USDAW to share the message. Hopefully soon we shall see some positives come out of something that isn't fantastic at the moment, but hopefully, as we've all said, something positive can come out from it.
No, and I hope so. And again, a massive thank you to you and your colleagues for the work that you are doing, and will continue to do so. We've obviously seen that these restrictions, social distancing is going to be with us for a while, added to some of those previous issues we've heard about restricted goods that you're already having to deal with, and saying no to people. If I can just bring in Paddy, final thoughts. Thank you for joining us. Oh, are you still there?
There we are.
Yes. Yep.
Hi. Yes, Emma, thanks. I mean, this is about Claire and our millions of colleagues across the retail sector across the UK. And you know, abuse should not be part of the job. And in this crisis, the society, the public and the government have finally recognised that our retail workers, our key workers, deliver an essential service. Well, the time's come to provide them with the protection they need against abuse on the front line. And I finish in this. You know, respect our retail workers, appreciate our retail workers, and please support our retail workers.
Thank you very much. A really clear message, I think, for us to leave on tonight in terms of supporting our retail workers. If you want to find out more about the campaigning, particularly what we're doing within the co-op movement and leading from the co-op party, you can go to our website, party.coop/retail violence bill. You can find out how you can support the work that Alex is doing, and obviously Daniel as well, if you're in Scotland, to put the pressure on the MSPs there to support his bill as it goes through Parliament. So yeah, sign up on that website, find out more about the campaign, talk to your colleagues about it, and please help us raise this issue. It just leaves me to say thank you very much to our speakers. You've all given us great insight tonight. Thank you, mate, very much for your time. And without further ado, I will say have a good evening. See you later.